I am alive and well. Do not believe silly conspiracy theories.
But first, a major blow to the largest natural gas field in the world. That is the explosion you're seeing playing out on your screen. The name of the field is called South Pars, and it's known as Iran's energy lifeline. And the missile responsible for that fire came out of Israel. Iran hit back overnight with a number of attacks across the region, including on liquid natural gas facilities in Qatar. The White House claims it was blindsided by the move from Israel. President Trump posted on social media saying the United States knew nothing about this particular attack, adding no more attacks will be made by Israel pertaining to this extremely important and valuable South Pars field unless Iran unwisely decides to attack a very innocent Qatar. If they do, the president promised to, quote, massively blow up the entirety of the South Pars gas field at an amount of strength and power that Iran has never seen or witnessed before.
We hold the cards. We have objectives. Those objectives are clear. We have allies pursuing objectives as well. And the truth speaks for itself. Iran knows when you hit Karg Island and you hit military capabilities on Karg Island, which is the only thing we hit, we can hold anything at issue. Anything. The United States military controls the fate of that country.
Dude, this is going to be a bit of a full-on conspiracy rant, but I don't think there's any avoiding it at this stage. It's, dude, there's so much stuff going on. It's like you just have to force yourself to stop, and I'm just going to talk about what I'm going to talk about, and, you know, things are developing by the hour, and, yeah, it's crazy. Everybody knows, you know. So I've been trying to put out a video every week or so, every weekend. I think I've kind of settled on the weekend. And so that kind of enables me to do a little bit more, you know, current events and stuff. But yeah, this week has been a crazy week with the escalations, obviously, with the Iran conflict. And we got to talk about Netanyahu. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Netanyahu, the deep fakes, these trollish proof of life videos that are blatantly AI. And we got to talk about Joe Kent and his earth-shattering resignation from the counterterrorism department, or whatever his job title was. The Joe Kent phenomenon, and I watched his whole interview on Tucker, which was kind of interesting. And Professor Jiang, and yeah, we got to talk about all these guys, and I'm basically back to the point where, more than ever, I'm convinced that all these guys, they're spooks. This is all part of this new alternative media. This is the new Mockingbird media, and it only became so much more apparent this week, and we'll get into that. But these Netanyahu videos, man, I'm assuming everyone has at least heard of these if you haven't seen them all, because there was like the 5 different shorts that came out that were all blatantly AI. At least the first several were like, it was so in your face, with the extra fingers, and then they're mocking, oh, I have 5 fingers underneath. The one with Huckabee was really cringe, where they're talking about his kill list, and Huckabee's like, I'm glad I'm not on the list.
I'm alive, but I have this card.
Oh.
And, yeah, don't read it.
Oh.
So, it's a punch card.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I erased 2 names on the punch cards, and you see how many more to go on this batch.
You know what the good news is? My name is not on the punch card.
Your name is on the list of the good guys.
Thank you.
And what the president, the U.S. forces are doing is incredible. We're very proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And getting rid of these lunatics who would like to develop nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to every American city after wiping out Israel. They ain't going to do that. We're wiping them out.
I love it. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Take care.
It's like, what is this? And then he does the longer press conference where everyone's like, oh, okay, I guess he's still alive. Which I don't know if that's convincing to me or not. I mean, I'm still, yeah, I could go either way in terms of him being, because some people have speculated that he died around March 8th. And apparently his son was a big Twitter addict and tweeting like 40 times a day. And then from March 8th, he was like totally silent for a week, which would be the time where you're sitting Shiva and in mourning. So yeah, people are still speculating whether he was killed in that attack on his residence or whatever it was. And this press conference that was like 30 minutes, it was still a virtual press conference. So it's not unthinkable that this could be AI as well. Or somebody was mentioning to me that this could just be somebody wearing a mask. You know, the CIA lifelike mask technology, and then you just dub in a voice or whatever. You know, he could be dead, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, either way, whether he's alive or dead, the trolling is real. The trolling is no doubt that some of these videos that were put out by his X account were fake. They were AI. And like the Huckabee one, Huckabee validated it, saying that he was there. He should know. He you know. So if nothing else, it's some kind of a honeypot and some kind of a gaslighting operation here. And it was crazy because it made me think about videos I made and had to go back to 2019 where I made this video called A Hall of Black Mirrors.
And perhaps you can see where this is going. A deep fake of a politician announcing a ban, a strike, war. A deep fake of a news anchor explaining events that never actually happened. People begin to question if what they're seeing is true. And how can a democracy function if people cannot tell the difference between real and fake information? Furthermore, people begin to question real information, which perhaps could be falsified. You can see where this story is going. Deepfake propaganda leads to weaponized deepfakes. We begin to question everything. We fall into this existential crisis, lamenting the ends of reality. Everything is fake, nothing is real anymore.
Where I was speculating about pretty much this exact type of thing. You know, we didn't really have generative AI yet. We just had this is when they were first talking about deepfake technology and facial swapping technology and all this stuff that now is like so commonplace. But it's been interesting because so many people have been focused on the obvious fakery going on with Netanyahu, and of course that serves to point people further towards the conclusion that, you know, Israel is just unhinged and crazy and out of the U.S. control, which, of course, was further validated by Joe Kent in his resignation letter. And that's why it's getting so much attention, is because it's like he's validating all the things that people like Tucker and Candace and, you know, increasing number of people in the alternative media and, you know, the great noticing phenomenon that has been going on. Finally, you had somebody from the administration, you know, who was an insider, who was testifying and validating this, this idea that, yeah, Israel is the one calling the shots, and whether that's because of blackmail or just because of people captured by Zionist ideology or all of the above, you know, that's what Joe's resignation was all about. And of course, now he's being attacked by the Zionist mainstream. And this only seems to further validate his position. So yeah, I had no idea. I had never paid attention to Joe Kent prior to this week. So I was coming into it kind of totally brand new. Like, I had no opinion of this guy one way or the other. I had no preconceived ideas, no anything. And so it's interesting whenever that happens and you just kind of are confronted with somebody for the very first time. And so when I was listening to this Tucker interview, I think it was even before the interview began, in the first 18 to 20 minutes, Tucker does this big lengthy intro, kind of setting the stage and basically waxing poetic about, basically to spell out to people that if somebody's being persecuted and silenced and accused of, all these horrific things, it just means that he's telling the truth. And it was a little bit too overboard, and it was specifically where he started getting into the identity that he's basically the perfect archetypal guy to be making these claims because of his background, doing 11 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and his whole track record. So you can't say that he's like soft on terror or whatever. So here's a little clip.
So let's hope that tonight, with this conversation with Joe Kent, is the beginning of the long overdue truth-telling, which is the only thing that will save this country. And one final note about Joe Kent, who I spent the last 24 hours with. Joe Kent's resume hardly needs explanation because everyone is aware this is a man who deployed on 11 combat missions to the global war on terror. This is sort of the perfect representation of the GWAT generation. This is one of those guys we often celebrate but too rarely hear from, who we sent out to fight the so-called war on terror that began on 9/11. And it's an entire generation of men who look and sound, for the most part, very much like Joe Kent. So the implication, of course, he doesn't care about security or he's soft on Iran. Joe Kent spent, well, the majority of his 20s and 30s fighting Iranian proxies and watching his friends get killed by them. So this is someone who's actually earned the right to speak about Iran and the war on terror. And of course, he was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. So he's thought a lot about terrorism in this country and the blowback from events like this. And we're going to ask him about that as well. But the other thing to notice about Joe Kent, and it may be his defining factor, is that he doesn't slander anyone. His resignation letter was not an attack on Donald Trump. It wasn't a promise to write a tell-all memoir about what he saw on the inside or to aggrandize himself or to get a job on a TV show or sell something. I asked him at dinner last night, what are your plans? None. He did this purely because he believes, as he'll explain in a second, this is the only way to save the United States from certain disaster. Tell the truth.
This is sort of the perfect representation of the GWAT generation. This is one of those guys we often celebrate, but too rarely hear from.
So right out of the gate, I was like, you know what? There was something about this entire interview, but before it even got underway, I was like, it's just a little too perfect. It's a little bit too exact. You know, it's like this, he was just tailor-made for this moment, you know? And then you start to look into their background, and lo and behold, I mentioned the 11 deployments, and then he retired from the military in 2018, but then joined, I mean, it's right there on his Wikipedia, that he became a paramilitary officer for the CIA. So basically, we're talking about two CIA guys sitting down, having a conversation, and what I would see now is just doing exposition for, you know, the normie audience, or the quasi alternative media audience that Tucker has now kind of, he really is kind of the kingmaker, I see him now, of this new coalition, this new post-MAGA, you know, the fact that Israel called him the greatest anti-Semite in the world and everything. It's like, this is all by design. This is all part of what I think is the new dialectic. We'll get into that in a minute. But so anyways, so he became a paramilitary officer for the CIA in 2018. And then his wife at the time, who was also military intelligence, a cryptologist, who was on assignment in Syria, and she got killed by a suicide bomber in 2019. And then, he decides to become politically active and run for Congress for a Washington state congressional seat. He doesn't win, but he did write a book about his wife, you know, dying in Syria, called Send Me. And then I'm looking back, and here he was in 2024 being interviewed by Sean Ryan, also quote-unquote former CIA, promoting his book, promoting his whole, you know, his whole story, his whole brand, his whole identity.
My name is Joe Kent. I'm an America First Republican running against Congresswoman Butler. Congresswoman Butler voted for the impeachment of President Trump with the Democrats. The Pacific Northwest has always been my home. I grew up camping and hiking throughout the Cascade Mountain Range and exploring the Columbia River Valley Gorge and Boy Scouts. I was fascinated by the outdoors. Inspired by the Rangers from the famous Black Hawk Down incident in 1993 in Mogadishu, I enlisted in the Army at age 18 and earned my way into Ranger Regiment and eventually Special Forces. When our nation was attacked on 9/11, I was exactly where I wanted to be, defending my country. Throughout 11 combat deployments, I saw the failures of the government establishment, keeping us at war in the Middle East. I became an America First Republican after watching our government lie about regime change wars and ship our economy overseas. In the midst of continual combat, I met and married my soulmate, Shannon Kent, a fellow warrior and special operator. Shannon blessed me with 2 sons and a loving family life. I plan to continue to serve our nation abroad, fighting our enemies overseas, until the 16th of January 2019, when Shannon was killed fighting ISIS in Manbij, Syria. I was devastated. I left my job in the intelligence community and returned home to the Pacific Northwest. But peace wasn't in store for us. Shortly after we returned home, I watched Portland and Seattle devolve into nightly riots and lawlessness, once beautiful cities destroyed by the left's quest for power. I wanted to do something to stop the downward spiral that our society was heading. In 20 years of fighting on the battlefields and through my wife's death, I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of failed policy. The events of 2020, including the lockdowns, riots, and a presidential election manipulated by a cabal of technocrats and bureaucrats, followed by a sham impeachment that our Congresswoman voted for, made it clear to me that I had to go forward and fight once more. I've never been someone who can ask others to go and fight for me. That's why I'm asking to go fight for you in Congress, just like I did throughout my 11 combat deployments. I view this fight in Congress as a continuation of the oath that I took 23 years ago. I'm here to support and defend the Constitution and to fight for my fellow Americans. The entire time I was fighting overseas, I lived by the motto, if not me, then who? If not when, but now. Send me. Together, we can elect someone to replace Congresswoman Butler who won't betray our values.
Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Right, so it's like, at this point, you know, anytime there's like a book, I mean, it's like, I'm getting J.D. Vance vibes, it's just, I don't know, this might upset people, I don't really care at this point, because I'm sort of always on the lookout for what are the less obvious psyops, what are the less obvious, you know, the obvious propaganda everybody's meant to see, everybody's meant to react to. But, you know, Joe Kent is being contrasted against Tulsi Gabbard, who her whole political career was all about, you know, ending these forever wars and the regime change wars and all the post 9/11 hangover that our whole generation has been experiencing for so long. Tulsi Gabbard was supposed to be the person standing up to this and opposing the Iran war, and everyone believed that that's what Trump was going to be, right? So that's why there's so much emotional investment and wanting to believe Tucker and wanting to believe a guy like Joe Kent and believe, you know, but there, it's like, okay, I guess I'm just super cynical, super jaded at this point, but I don't think so. And I think this week is very interesting because I think we're starting to really see a lot of the pieces come together in terms of this new dialectic, and Tucker being at the center of it. But yet the whole conversation that Joe Kent and Tucker had was covering, they didn't just talk about Iran and the fact that there was no imminent threat. That was kind of the bombshell point with his whole resignation, that, like, you know, from his position, having access to classified intel, he's coming out and saying there was no imminent threat by Iran, and so we started this conflict. We are the aggressors. It's kind of what everybody else, you know, saying the quiet part out loud, what everyone else already knows, that, like, this is bogus. So it's being validated by Joe Kent. So understandably, it's a big deal. But then the conversation really kind of expanded into a whole lot of things, and it was just connecting all the dots in terms of the Charlie Kirk assassination fiasco and basically pointing the finger at Israel there. So that's getting a lot of attention. Also tying in the 2 alleged assassination attempts on Trump as being somehow connected to Iran or Israel, you know, blaming Iran, and so controlling Trump that way. And you guys already know what I think about specifically the Butler PA assassination. And it was all fake. So yeah, it's like you see how all this stuff from the past year, now that here we are with the Strait of Hormuz insanity, and they're putting the squeeze on the whole global economy, all this stuff was build up for it. You can see how it all is fitting together, and how now, you know, you have guys like Joe Kent, who was just kind of in the background, you know, playing a very pivotal role. And so, yeah, the whole time I was watching this, it was just so much confirmation that, like, this is what we are supposed to conclude. They want people to turn on Zionism. They want people to blame the Zionists for essentially tanking the world economy. And we can talk about what the reasons for that may be. That's still up for debate, I say. But the fact that they want, and that started with October 7th, I would say, and all the carnage in Gaza, it was all done intentionally, or at least knowingly, knowing that there was going to be backlash, and then you just turn that backlash into more quote-unquote proof of anti-Semitism, and it just becomes the self-fulfilling, the self-fueling, eschatological spiraling thing. Where it's like, how do you get the whole world to come and attack Israel? Well, you you do more and more unhinged things. But really, this is all by the design of the globalist. In the same way that, like, the right-left paradigm it's a dialectic, it's a false dualism that has been used in America for decades, right? This is just another version of that so I'm not... Obviously, if you guys have been following my channel, I'm not defending Zionism or Israel. But it's in the same way that, like, pointing to the lefties and trying to own the libs and seeing that, like, all the evil in the world is being simply coming from, leftism. That's dialectical thinking. That's keeping you in the right-left paradigm, and you can only ever see half the picture, and you're blind to whatever they want to... this is going on right now, right? With everything that they attach to Trump, in terms of the PayPal mafia and the technocracy and the crypto scam with stablecoin. Like, most people on the right are completely oblivious to all of this stuff, Palantir, everything. And so it's that false it's that dialectic at work. And so ultimately, I don't think they care if you're anti-Zionism or pro-Zionism, whether you're blaming the Israelis and Trump and the Christian Zionists in America, or you're blaming the Muslim terrorists. I don't think they care. As long as you don't see that this is all by design in order to crash the world economy on purpose and create, chaos and devastation that way, or at least the very real and serious threat. Like, how close we're going to go to the edge or over the edge remains to be seen. But the threat is real. I mean, like, closing the Strait of Hormuz and, playing with the price of oil and all the ripple effects. Yeah, this really is the chokehold. This really is the gun to the head of, the public around the world. And speaking of dialectics and things, I think another thing worth mentioning is that Joe Kent is also a Catholic, and he spoke at this Catholic prayer event in DC this week alongside Candace Owens. And this is only all days after this resignation letter. Like, he puts the resignation letter out, and then like a day or two later, he's up in Maine, hanging out with Tucker for a day. He's on Megyn Kelly. He's on, I'm sure he'll be on Joe Rogan probably within a week. He's making the rounds. He's busy. His letter got like over 100 million views on X. He's getting major play, but I think Joe Kent is a spook. I don't think there is such a thing as former CIA. And yeah, he's been talking to Tucker, the grandmaster of the new alternative Mockingbird media. Now, that being said, in the same week, interestingly enough, so I was already kind of tripping out over the Joe Kent interview with Tucker, and then I see that this Professor Jiang, Professor Jiang is the very next guest on the Tucker Carlson podcast, which is crazy timing. And the rise of Professor Jiang, I've talked about him a couple times before. He was virtually unknown a few months ago, like 6 months ago. Definitely nobody knew who he was. So he just exploded almost overnight. And so this week I finally stopped and kind of tried to dig into his background a little bit more. And that is super bizarre. Speaking of spooks, they're all spooks. But he's called Professor Jiang, but he's actually not a college professor. He's a high school teacher, an English teacher, who does these classes talking about, world geopolitics and religion and end time stuff. I mean, he's a total Gnostic spiritually. So you got Joe Kent, who's part of that whole like ecumenical kind of push to, encourage people to go back to the Roman Catholic Church, because we're painting evangelicalism and Protestantism as just being totally corrupted by Zionism. And then Jiang is kind of a similar vein in terms of like, he doesn't even believe in the Bible at all, but he has lots of opinions about it, and they're Gnostic. But he talks about the Illuminati and all the conspiracy stuff, and he's blown up. But it gets really weird when you stop and you look into his background, and, his family moved from China to Toronto, Canada, when he was age 6. And then, so he grew up in Canada and then was educated at Yale. He got a scholarship to go to Yale, which is a major spook central. That's where Skull and Bones is. And then as an undergrad, he went back to China, I think, to teach. And it gets really weird because somehow he's written articles for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, a bunch of other publications. Even though he's never been more than a high school teacher. And in 2001, he was working with PBS to do some filming for documentary in China about the economy, and so he was arrested by the Chinese government and deported back to Canada, and then a year later allowed to come back to China, which is like, how often does that happen? That's where it starts getting like real spooky. And then at some point, like the dates aren't even clear to when all this happened, but at some point he was working for this global innovation education initiative through Harvard, some department of Harvard. And when you look into this global innovation education initiative, one of the things that jumps out, a lot of it's just lofty jargon that doesn't tell you much, but when you look at this section on global citizenship, it's like, okay, yeah, this is it's like a global education think tank, research outfit, whatever, he's a globalist. So this idea, I've seen videos where people are saying, oh, he's working because he's in China now. So I understand why people think that he'd be part of the CCP, but I'm like, no, dude, this, and if you're able to kind of wrap your head around the idea that maybe China is actually a lot more controlled by Western intelligence agencies, or at least in cooperation, than a lot of people think, yeah, he's not a Chinese spy, but you have to stop and ponder how weird it is that this guy, who's a Yale graduate, worked at this Harvard globalist educational thing, is now living in Beijing teaching at this moonshot school. But he's teaching in English and he's posting his lessons onto his YouTube channel. And oh yeah, by the way, isn't YouTube banned by the Chinese government? How is this guy even on YouTube? How does this guy have the freedom to be talking about world politics and talking to Tucker Carlson? I mean, yeah, so he's... This guy glows like nobody's business, and so Tucker spent 20 minutes introducing Joe Kent and like what a great guy he was and elaborating upon his whole resume and everything like that. But with Professor Jiang, he's like, I don't know who this guy is. All I know is I've watched a few videos and he has a lot to say and he's made all these predictions, so here we go. Let's give him an interview. So the part that I wanted to play here is a clip that blew me away, is that Jiang is explaining how because of the implosion of the world economy due to the Iran-Israel war, that the United States is going to need to absorb Canada and Mexico, along with Greenland and Venezuela and Cuba, and effectively creating the North American Union. And Tucker Mockingbird Carlson is in total agreement.
So, from a geopolitical perspective, if America is forced to retreat back into the Western Hemisphere, it needs to worry about resources. And so it is in the best interest of America to eventually take over and colonize both Canada and Mexico.
Yes.
Mexico for its labor supply, Canada for its resources. That's Canada's probably the wealthiest country in the world.
I know.
And so from a geopolitical perspective, if the world is retreating into self-sufficiency, if there's mercantilism, if there's trade barriers, then America has absolutely no choice but to ensure its own supply networks. And that means eventually taking over Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Latin America, Cuba, Venezuela. So America doesn't really have much choice in this matter. At the same time, what we're seeing is that this war, as well as other events, are causing political fissures in America, especially between left and right. So witness what happened in Minneapolis in January, right? And so we can expect that as this war continues, and there's a strong possibility that Donald Trump will call up a national draft in order to ensure the manpower to fight this war, then you will have rioting in the streets, you have massive violence, in which case the National Guard is deployed. There's a plan to deploy the National Guard to all major American cities by April. And so, unfortunately, America is probably going to suffer many years of sectarian violence. Not a full-fledged civil war, but maybe something along the lines of the Troubles in Ireland. I'm not sure if you've seen this terrible movie called One Battle After Another. It's just a terrible movie, by the way, but it gives you insight into what a civil war might look like, where you have these insurgent groups fighting against the state. So yeah.
So I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that clip, because it's like, yeah, how crazy is this? That here's these two guys, all three of these guys, right, who are all, these guys are all basically exposing the Zionist element of the American-Israeli war machine. The Trump administration has labeled Tucker as it's like one of its number one enemies, and yet here Tucker is basically advocating the same idea that Trump and Rubio and Hegseth and all these guys have been kind of seeding into the public consciousness for the past year, talking about buying Greenland and joking about absorbing Canada. And of course, everybody knows about Venezuela, and then now Cuba's next. They're basically starving Cuba right now. So it's a crazy time. But here's Professor Jiang and Tucker advocating for the same North American Union, the same technate, in the name of a mercantile, self-preservation kind of reaction to this worldwide economic chaos. And so, as I've been thinking about that, I'm like, okay, that's as crazy as it sounds. It totally just makes sense as to what they're really doing with all this. And how this is really, this is the COVID 2.0 plan, where instead of, stay home, save lives, it's stay home, save fuel, stay home, save gas. And you can start to put the squeeze on. I mean, it's already happening. We've already, I think, peaked at $118 a barrel, is the list I saw. And so whether it goes all the way up to 200 and you just devastate economies and people start actually starving, or just the very real tangible threat, I mean, people will freak out. It doesn't take that many days of empty shelves and panic buying and all that stuff to where you have the public in a very malleable state. And so when it comes down to I'm sure there's, in all countries, even in the US, like the idea of absorbing everyone into basically an American version of the EU. That's what the North American Union is basically. I mean, and they've been talking about this for so long. It's crazy that we're actually watching Mr. Carlson actually talking about the same thing that, the Technocracy Inc. people were proposing almost 100 years ago. And then, the Club of Rome and all this stuff, these different regional economic zones. But if it was a matter of like, hey, do you want to eat? Do you want to survive? Do you want to keep the lights on? Like, if it's presented as the only solution to, starving or freezing to death in the winter, or, mass... Yeah, I think people would start to be like, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Maybe it is time for sort of a third political party to arise that is neither Democrat nor Republican, and that would kind of make sense. And this is what I mean by sort of an emerging new dialectic to get away from the Republican-Democrat dialectic. At some point, you got to think it's kind of going to people are catching on that it's the uniparty, right? As Jimmy Dore loves saying, no matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain. People are so sick of voting for one side or the other and then them, totally bailing on their promises. Especially since 9/11, we've seen that happen so much more blatantly. And so if we're going to elevate that sort of political dialectic onto a more regional North America, you got to have to kind of create, maybe even worldwide, to where the new worldwide political dialectic is, do you support Israel or not? I mean, that's what Zionism wants to make sort of the ultimate, that's all they care about. Is, are you a quote-unquote anti-Semite or not, right? And so that just gives us a whole new thing to argue about, a whole new thing to get up in arms and be divided over with our friends and families. When in reality, they're building the one world system, and they don't care which side you're arguing for as long as you're doing it on your mobile slave device and you're using their social media platforms and using AI to collate your research and everything. It's win-win. They don't care. The whole point is we're ushering in the new system. So the whole point of this outline and this rant here is, I'm not trying to spread fear, but simply acknowledge that this war in Iran and the subsequent economic hardship, or the threat of economic hardship, is designed to instill fear and anxiety and trauma as a leverage tool, right? Just like COVID was. People were afraid of getting sick and dying and afraid of killing grandma and afraid, they use fear to force people to lock themselves down And so this will be slightly different in terms of like, economic pressure. And then, just coincidentally at the same time, we still had this TSA debacle going on in so many airports because of the partial government shutdown. Totally coincidental timing, right? So travel is already kind of a nightmare at the airports. And we're not even really into the crude has not really hit the fan yet in terms of fuel prices, and it's still being cushioned by things like reserves, and we've barely scratched the surface of like how insane they can really make it in terms of disrupting supply chains and travel routes. And yeah, this is a card they've been waiting to play, the Strait of Hormuz card. They've been talking about it for like my whole adult life. So here we go, buckle up. Sorry, I'm not trying to spread the fear, but if you understand what the end game is and what they're trying to use that fear to pressure people into, then at the very least you can kind of stay removed from it and not get caught up in that anxiety. It doesn't mean that it isn't stressful and it isn't going to be hard. And I mean, when food gets really expensive, that makes it hard on everybody, and everyone's already struggling. So there's no point in pretending like it's not going to suck. It's going to suck. It's going to suck no matter what. And we all basically have the same choice of stopping and looking to something bigger than man and bigger than the systems of man. Like, ultimately, where does your security lie? Where does your hope really come from? Is it coming from earthly assurances and politicians and scientists and talking heads on the internet? All these mockingbird people, they're all spooks, man. It's like never been more clear to me, like all these people. And I don't know about, Kim Iverson, but dude, speaking of Kim Iverson, in the dialectic, it's like, okay, I'm not saying she's doing this on purpose, but I was watching, I don't think she even understands what she's doing, but yeah, I caught this video where she's talking about the Joe Kent thing and the resignation, and she's like, wow, this is amazing because it's validating all this stuff about Israel, right? And then right in the middle of her video, she does an ad for the Rumble wallet with the crypto and Tether because you could get debanked.
You may have seen the conversations happening online lately. Censorship is back. It's happening everywhere. Platforms are controlling narratives and pushing the stuff they want us to see. We need to fight back. And Rumble is the only company that has stood the test of time and deserves our support. On one side, Rumble is challenging big tech censorship. But now on the other side, they've introduced something that will give us protection from the big banks shutting us down. Banks can cancel our accounts and freeze our cards, so that's why they launched Rumble Wallet, a wallet that no one can cancel and a wallet that supporters can use to instantly tip creators like myself without any middlemen taking cuts. With Rumble Wallet, you control your money, not a bank, not a government, not a tech company, not even Rumble can touch it. It's yours, yours only, yours to protect your future and family. You can buy and save digital assets like Bitcoin, Tether Gold, and now the new USAT, Tether's US-regulated stablecoin in one place. Tether Gold is real gold on the blockchain with ownership of physical gold bars. USAT keeps your money steady against inflation, no banks needed. It's not only a wallet to buy and save, but it also allows you to support your favorite creators by easily tipping them with the click of a button. There'll be no fees when you tip my channel or others, and we actually receive the tip instantly, unlike other platforms where we have to
wait for payouts. So support my show and other creators by clicking the tip button on my Rumble channel. It's wallet.rumble.com. Download Rumble Wallet today, open an account, and step away from the big banks for good. Again, wallet.rumble.com, or search for Rumble Wallet in the app stores.
So, even though she's speaking out against Zionism, it's like, is she just, she might just be oblivious to the fact that, okay, this Rumble wallet, who funded Rumble, by the way? But the Rumble wallet and like that little, Tether being like sort of the quintessential stablecoin that, guys like Howard Lutnick and Epstein, so much more has come out in the past few weeks because of the Epstein files about Lutnick's involvement in connection with his firm, Cantor Fitzgerald. I mean, I watched a podcast like a week or two ago that Corbett did with this crypto guy, and they just went into all this detail about Lutnick and Cantor Fitzgerald and the stablecoin. I mean, this is what you, if you don't understand this side of it, then you're missing, like, this is the Great Reset. This is why you kill the petrodollar. This is why they're doing what they're doing. It's because they want to replace the petrodollar with stablecoin is basically this new mechanism to kind of sucker people into buying U.S. treasuries and U.S. debt. And this is how you keep the Ponzi scheme going, at least for another 10 years. But it's essentially CBDCs just through the private sector. That's all it is. It's the same thing. You have the same controls. It's all blockchain based with backdoors, and they can see everything everybody's doing and have total control over. It's the, it's everything that Catherine Austin Fitts has been warning about for years, right? That's what this Rumble wallet is basically trying to sell you. So yeah, dialectic boogaloo everywhere you turn. But if we're rooted in Christ and our hope is in the eternal gospel of his salvation, then, ultimately we got to just look at all this as evidence of his prophetic fulfillment. Even though it's obviously not going to play out the way that the dispensationalist narrative has convinced, millions of people that it's going to play out. And, they believe they're going to be whisked away before they have to encounter any severe hardship or persecution or whatever. And by the way, I think the Satan's Little Season crowd is essentially guilty of the same error, in my opinion, basically convincing themselves that they don't got to worry about enduring anything. They don't have to worry about enduring hardship or persecution because all that stuff supposedly went down in the first century. So, like, on a pragmatic level, it's the same, they have the same mentality, and it's the same, like, dissociative state as the pre-trib people, which they're so haughty against. And so proud that they've found the truth of this basically revamped preterist narrative. But they both offer the same sort of salve of, I don't have to worry about end times tribulation, because that's fear porn, that's what they want to believe. But we're not going to have to endure anything. And I'm like, sorry, that's not what I read in my Bible. And yeah, the bizarre events of all these AI clips of Bibi this week, it's just made me think about this whole sort of idea of American society, and I guess the world society overall, in the past several generations even, kind of existing in this massive, ongoing, dissociated state, like, at least, most of my life. We have this culture we've already blurred the lines between fantasy and reality so much, just even before the internet came along. We've binged on all these decades of Hollywood and televised escapism and science fiction, utopian, transhumanist slopaganda. We've grown up in it. Our minds being filled with explosions and violence and cartoonish, it's when you see all this stuff going on with the White House putting out these memes with cartoons spliced into bombs going off and buildings blowing up. It's this is almost like the perfect ending to this Hollywood empire, right? The fact that we could get to this place and we're so desensitized is really something to behold, but in some ways it's kind of fitting, I guess. As we've watched conflict after conflict ever since World War II unfolding in different parts of the world and seeing the footage of bombs exploding and houses burning and people dying and, people just get numb to it. Until you're actually there, boots on the ground, and you are one of those, men or women who've experienced it firsthand. And that's why somebody like, Joe Kent and a book about your wife, it's I know it's probably super offensive to people to dare suggest that somebody would even use something like that to lie about. But again, once you've understood, through looking back on 9/11 and the whole false flag modus operandi and October 7th, they don't have that line of things that you just would never joke about. I mean, you see that there's nothing that they would not use to manipulate people on that emotional level. Same thing with the Trump assassination and the firefighter dad who got killed, and they'll do whatever it takes to pull your heartstrings. 9/11 was the masterclass of this, and they've been support the troops. With Israelis, it was bring the hostages home. And what about the veterans and the PO? They'll use all of this stuff. They have no shame. There is no lie. It doesn't cost anything to tell lies. It's the most effective weapon that the enemy has, the father of lies. And so part of it is just coming to that simple understanding that there are people who just have zero, they have seared their consciences as with a hot iron, just like Scripture says, to where there's nothing that is beneath them. Does that make sense? And for people who still have some semblance of a conscience, that's impossible for us to conceive of. It's so sociopathic and we just can't fathom it. And that's why it's effective, because it's like we refuse to believe that somebody could lie about something so deadly serious for the sake of, manipulating others or making money or, helping create a one world government or whatever, furthering their own career. The people who say whatever they're given to say for a paycheck, that's how the whole New World Order pyramid is built. It's a whole system that rewards dissociative behavior. And the more disoriented you get about all, political realities and economic realities, ultimately what Satan wants people to doubt is the reality of God, the reality that the Bible is true and that Jesus is exactly who he said he was, and that he is coming back. And so it's all about creating doubt. You create this whole false Zionist, dispensationalist, Huckabee, straw man eschatology and just make a mockery of it on the world stage. And, basically make Bible-believing Protestant Christians in alignment with the new Nazi regime. I mean, it's crazy irony that Satan would flip the script in such a way and use the trauma of World War II, right? Both the reality and the psychological trauma that was been inflicted upon everybody just through propaganda, and create this new apartheid state in 1948, which indoctrinates its citizens into this ethno-supremacist ideology in the name of Abraham, in the name of Torah, in the name of God, and then use that to plunge the world into chaos and ultimately a new economic and political order. That's a pretty crazy conspiracy theory. But it seems like that's what's happening. That's all I don't know what else to tell you. That's what I see. It's what I see in Scripture even, and in the world, and they align. But yeah, it is crazy ironic that our whole obsession with Hollywood movie magic that we all basically grew up with, right? That it would culminate in this current atmosphere of abject confusion and Orwellian obfuscation. Our mobile telescreens flashing more images and commentary than our limited human brains can even process at this point, or know what to believe. And it creates this state of learned helplessness in the digital moviescape, and everyone being fueled by carnal emotions and hearing God and faith all interjected into the carnage and death. What even is America at this point? I've been wrestling with that for so many years now. But whatever it is, it's something that will not endure into the age to come. The perishable cannot inherit the imperishable. Nothing these politicians and futurists are promising are going to achieve what they think they're going to achieve. In the end, they're all instruments of God and His judgment and His perfect giving people what they want or what they think they want. And so we can look at all this going on and actually be encouraged. God has known the end from the beginning, and God is not surprised by any of it. God can provide for those. He knows our needs. We have to be willing to maybe go through things that are uncomfortable, or even face death if it comes to that, rather than forsake Christ. But no matter what happens, this world is not our home. The American dream is not what Christ died for. It's not our hope. It's not our gospel. Maybe that's a blessing. That's how I'm looking at it. It's like maybe the Hollywood idolatry, the American dream idolatry, the almighty dollar, the lust of Wall Street and the seduction of Silicon Valley, all this stuff to be revealed for the mystery Babylon deceptions that they are is the greatest blessing. It's the greatest gift. And to find something infinitely more valuable through a relationship with God, through Jesus. And while craziness is going on, people are being saved and people are being brought into the kingdom and people are being set free. And to actually, it could be like the most exciting time of our lives and the most encouraging and faith-building and, but it sounds bizarre to the rest of the world. That we could, have joy in the midst of the chaos. But I believe that's what we are called to do, and that's the message I want to emphasize and be reminding myself of. Having true joy in the midst of everything going on, because we know that our Savior lives. And in the end, we have victory over death itself, which is just incredible. There's nothing that beats that. There's nothing that tops eternal life with God forever. No amount of money can purchase what Christ has given us freely. No amount of national security, no political nation state can give us what Christ can give us, even in this life, let alone the life to come and the age to come. And so, yeah, the answer, people are like, what, you're so negative, and it's like, I'm black-pilled on the world, I'm black-pilled on Babylon, but I'm all in on Jesus. You want solutions? People ask, like, well, what are your solutions? Yeah, there's one solution. There's only one solution, y'all. Because guess what? No matter if you live in peace and prosperity, or chaos and war and recession, I mean, no matter what, 100% guaranteed we are all going to face death at the end of the day. Some sooner than others. But death is the real enemy. Like facing God and standing before your Creator and giving an account, standing before a holy God while still being dead in your trespasses and sins. You know, I don't care if that sounds old-fashioned and dogmatic, and yeah, don't care. That's what I believe 100%. We need salvation. We need transformation. We need to be born again. We need our sins forgiven. We need to be given our heart of flesh in place of our heart of stone, changed from the inside out. You have to be spiritually reborn through the Spirit of God. You need the gospel. You need Jesus. That's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for souls of men. That's our war. That's our battle. We're fighting the strongholds of Satan's lies about who we are, where we came from, where we're going. Those are our objectives. Those are our targets. And the Word of God is our greatest weapon. We've been enlisted in that army. That's our fight. We exist in a totally different economy. It's a totally different hierarchy. It's a totally different... The world does not understand how the kingdom of God works and moves and is financed, and like God has all the resources. He's not limited by all this stuff. And he's going to continue using us to preach the truth to the ends of the earth until that final and dreadful day of the Lord. Dreadful to the rulers and the merchants of the earth, but a beautiful and glorious day for those who love him. So, take heart and keep your eyes on Jesus. And ask him what he's calling you to do today, and who to minister to, who to encourage, who to share with. All we really have is today. You know, tomorrow's not a guarantee for any of us. And so, to live is Christ and to die is gain, as Paul said in Philippians. All right, that's it for now.
I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, for you all making request, with joy for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. Even as it is meet for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as, both in my bonds and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, ye all are partakers of my grace. For God is my record, how greatly I long after you all in the bowels of Jesus Christ. And this I pray, that your love may abound yet more and more in knowledge and in all judgment, that ye may approve things that are excellent, that ye may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ, being filled with the fruits of righteousness which are by Jesus Christ, unto the glory and praise of God. But I would ye should understand, brethren, that the things which happened unto me have fallen out rather unto the furtherance of the gospel, so that my bonds in Christ are manifest in all the palace and in all other places. And many of the brethren in the Lord, waxing confident by my bonds, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Some indeed preach Christ even of envy and strife, and some also of goodwill. The one preach Christ of contention, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my bonds, but the other of love, knowing that I am set for the defense of the gospel. What then? Notwithstanding, every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and I therein do rejoice, yea, and will rejoice. For I know that this shall turn to my salvation, through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. according to my earnest expectation and my hope, that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but that with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ shall be magnified in my body, whether it be by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain.